Most backyard chicken operations fail silently within 36 months, not from disease or predators, but from a single decision made on the first morning at the feed store. This 7-step system rewires that decision and everyone that follows, producing eggs, meat, and packed fertility for your family across 2 full decades. Before a single bird touches your land, you need to know what you are actually buying under that heat lamp. Those chicks labeled laying hen at the farm supply store are almost always a commercial hybrid, bred inside a closed breeding program, engineered to hit 250 to 300 eggs in their first year by burning the bird through her own body until nothing is left to give. The ISA brown and the Lohmann brown are the 2 most common examples, and both run on the same idea. Sprint hard? Wear out, get replaced. By month 18, production drops. By month 30, the hen is spent. The industry designed it that way. You bought a consumable, not a living asset. Heritage Breeds' lineage runs on a completely different deal you make with the hen's body. A Plymouth Rock, a black Australorp, a Buff Orpington, these birds carry genetics stabilized over generations of outdoor seasonal production. They do not sprint. They move with the sun, pull back in winter while their reproductive tissue recovers fully, and return to the nest box the following spring with the same energy they started with. The result is a hen that lays productively for 5 to 7 years instead of 2. That single shift rewrites every number on your property. Stop buying the consumable. Start building the lineage. Stick around for the section on the deep litter reactor, because the carbon to nitrogen ratio it runs on wipes out coop cleaning entirely while generating passive winter heat your birds will depend on at 10 below zero. And pay close attention when we reach flock succession planning, because the 3-year rotation math is the only reason this system never stalls over 2 decades. As a general note, verify your local agricultural regulations before processing or selling any animal products, and consult a licensed veterinarian for flock health decisions. The predator problem is not abstract. It is a raccoon's hands, thick-fingered and patient, working the weave of a hexagonal wire panel in the dark until the intersections separate. Walk any rural neighborhood and count the coops wrapped in standard chicken wire. That thin, lightweight mesh gets sold at every hardware store and installed by almost every first-time chicken keeper. Raccoons do not chew through it. They grip it and pull it open at the joints. A determined raccoon opens standard chicken wire in under 4 minutes. A dog goes through it in seconds. The material was engineered to keep hens out of a garden. Nothing more. Here is how you actually fix it. 1/2-inch hardware cloth is a welded wire mesh where each intersection point fuses under heat during manufacturing, which means no grip and pull attack separates it. The wire gauge runs at 19 gauge or heavier. The 1/2-inch opening denies any adult predator a point to grab. Line every wall, every window, every ventilation gap with this material. The price difference over standard chicken wire amounts to less than a bag of premium coffee per linear foot, and it holds for 15 or more years without replacement. Surface predators are only half the equation. Foxes dig, skunks dig. Rats follow the smell of feed through 3 inches of packed earth and push under the foundation wall before sunrise. The counter is an apron, a 12-inch horizontal extension of the same 1/2-inch hardware cloth attached at the base of every wall and running outward flat along the ground. Bury it 2 inches or press it flat under packed gravel. Any animal that starts digging along the perimeter hits the horizontal mesh after a few inches of earth and stops. The excavation reflex runs headlong into geometry. No concrete footing required. Predator-proof geometry built once this way does not need to be rebuilt. One correct installation covers the full 20-year window this system targets. The common mistake is treating the coop as a temporary structure. Every flock lost to a predator erases weeks of egg production, breeding potential, and feed investment in a single night. Get the geometry right the first time. The single most labor-intensive part of keeping chickens, according to every beginner resource printed in the last 30 years, is cleaning the floor. Rake out the old bedding, haul it out, lay fresh shavings, repeat every 2 weeks. That routine burns hours every month, fills a pile of ammonia-soaked waste that stinks in warm weather, and completely misreads the biology happening 2 inches below the bird's feet. The deep litter method scraps that routine by building a living floor. Start with 6 to 8 inches of carbon-rich bedding, dry wood shavings, straw, dried leaves. Chickens scratch. They deposit manure. The nitrogen in that manure starts reacting with the carbon in the bedding material, and the relationship between those two elements is everything. The carbon to nitrogen ratio you are targeting sits between 25 to 1 and 30 to 1. Drop below that ratio, nitrogen takes over, ammonia builds in the air, and respiratory disease follows within weeks. Push above it and decomposition stalls, the floor goes cold, and you lose all the heat benefit. Maintain the ratio by adding dry carbon material whenever the floor smells sharp. One spread of dry shavings across the surface resets the balance within 24 hours. The microbial community breaking down that bedding generates heat as a direct byproduct of thermophilic composting. A well-managed deep litter floor reaches 130 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit inside the active decomposition layer. That heat radiates upward into the coop through the coldest nights of the year. A biological furnace. No electricity, no fuel, no cost. After 6 to 12 months, the bottom layer converts into finished compost at a quality level commercial nurseries charge the equivalent of a restaurant meal per cubic yard to sell. A 6 by 10 foot coop floor produces 3 to 5 cubic yards of this material per year. Sell the surplus to gardeners. Trade it with neighbors. Apply it directly to your vegetable beds. And that's when the coop stops being something you maintain and starts producing something worth money every single season. The chickens already hunting through your yard are running a calorie search engine. The zero-cost calorie engine formalizes that behavior by connecting the coop to 2 biological inputs that most keepers walk past every day without recognizing them. Black soldier fly larvae, Hermetia illucens, is the first. A bin adjacent to the coop accepts vegetable trimmings, grain dust, and manure from the coop floor itself. The larvae that develop in that bin carry 42% protein and 35% fat by dry weight. A single bin measuring 3 feet by 2 feet generates enough larval biomass to offset 20 to 30% of a small flock's daily feed requirement. No training needed. The moment a hen sees larvae move, the hunting response fires and she eats. Feed cost drops from the first week the bin turns productive, which happens roughly 3 to 4 weeks from first setup. Duckweed Lemna minor is the second input. It grows on still or slow-moving water under full sun, doubling its entire biomass every 24 to 48 hours under warm conditions. Dried duckweed tests at 25 to 45% crude protein, depending on growing conditions, comparable to commercial soybean meal that costs the equivalent of several fast food meals per bag. A 4 by 8 foot container filled with nutrient-rich water from the coop's rinse cycle produces a continuous harvest. Scoop the surface layer every 2 days and feed it fresh or dried. Here is what nobody expected when these two systems run together. The coop produces nitrogen-rich leachate. That leachate fertilizes the duckweed tank. The duckweed feeds the flock. The flock produces more manure. The manure feeds the BSF bin. The larvae feed the flock again. Nothing exits the system without first becoming feed or fertility. The feed store sells you a bag of processed pellets with a supply chain that breaks during every major disruption. This loop keeps producing whether the supply chain holds or not. Drop a comment below and tell me which system you are building first, the BSF bin or the duckweed tank. Water management separates a functioning winter flock from a dead one. A laying hen drinks between 1 and 2 cups of liquid water per day at moderate temperatures. Below freezing, that demand drops slightly, but a hen that finds ice where water should be stops eating within hours. Feed intake and water intake lock together tightly in poultry digestion, which means a frozen waterer does not just create thirst. It shuts down the entire metabolic cycle and stops egg production for days after water restores. The standard response is an electric immersion heater dropped into a metal waterer base. That works, but it creates a dependency on grid power, a recurring operating cost, and a failure point during exactly the power outages that winter storms produce. Passive solutions built on physics cost nothing to run and fail far less frequently. The primary method uses thermal mass, a waterer painted flat black and placed inside a south-facing cold frame or under a glazed panel, absorbs solar radiation through daylight hours, holding liquid temperature several degrees above ambient air. I wrap that same container in a rigid foam insulation sleeve to slow the heat loss after sunset. In hardiness zones 4 through 6, this combination holds liquid water through nights down to 10 or 15 degrees Fahrenheit without a single watt of electricity consumed. A parallel layer uses the deep litter floor heat from the previous step. Position a secondary waterer directly on the composting floor surface rather than on a raised platform. The biological heat radiating upward from that active decomposition layer keeps the base of the container above freezing even when the air temperature inside the coop drops sharply overnight. Daytime solar thermal gain plus nighttime floor heat creates a two-stage passive buffer. No plug, no bill, no single point of failure. And that's the difference between a system that runs through a February ice storm and one that needs daily intervention to survive it. Walk into a poorly built coop in January and two things hit you at once. The air is thick and sharp with the smell of ammonia. And yet not a single draft moves through the structure. The owner sealed every gap against the cold. The problem is that the humid, ammonia-loaded air collecting inside that sealed box destroys respiratory tissue faster than cold ever does. A chicken's respiratory system operates at higher efficiency than a mammal's, which makes it proportionally more sensitive to airborne particulates and ammonia concentration. The real enemy inside a winter coop is not the temperature. It is the trapped moisture that has nowhere to go. Ventilation and drafts are not the same thing. Conflating them kills birds. Ventilation is the deliberate movement of stale, humid air out of the coop through vents placed high on the wall, positioned above the height where birds sleep. Cold air is denser and sinks toward the floor. Warm, moist air produced by the flock rises and exits through the high openings before it saturates the bedding or the bird's airways. A draft is horizontal airflow that contacts a roosting bird directly at body level, stripping heat from the comb, wattles, and feet all night. Roosting architecture closes that gap at the structural level. Standard round dowel roosts force a hen to grip with her feet, which leaves the toes exposed to whatever air circulates at roost height through the night. Replace every round dowel with a flat 2-inch wide board. A bird standing flat-footed on that surface lowers her body over her own feet and covers them with breast feathers. The same insulating layer warming her core now wraps her feet. Frostbite. Prevention on combs follows a parallel logic. Select breeds carrying rose comb or pea comb genetics, which present minimal exposed tissue surface to the cold. Both Plymouth Rock and black Australorp fit this requirement. Build the ventilation high. Seal the draft at roost level. Select the board geometry that lets the bird use her own body as a coat. 3 adjustments. 0 cost. A winter flock that never loses a bird to cold injury. Every system with a 20-year horizon carries one gap that no beginner tutorial addresses. The production gap. A heritage hen lays productively for 5 to 7 years. But if the birds you started with all arrived the same week, they all age out the same season, the entire egg supply collapses in a single 18-month window. No warning. No transition. Flock succession. Planning closes that gap through a staggered 3-year rotation. Divide the target flock into 3 cohorts. Running 24 birds means 3 groups of 8. Hatch or acquire the first cohort in year 1. The second cohort enters in year 3. The third cohort enters in year 6. By the time Cohort 1 declines around year 5, Cohort 2 sits at peak production, and Cohort 3 is entering its first full lay season. The overlap guarantees the flock always carries birds in early production, peak production, and late production at the same time. The supply never stops. That rotation delivers a second benefit the math makes obvious. Heritage breeds fertilized by a well-selected heritage rooster produce offspring inheriting the same production longevity. Hatch your own replacements from your best laying hens, and the eggs-to-feed ratio stabilizes across generations. A standard 42-egg incubator runs a 21-day cycle and hatches one full replacement cohort at a cost equivalent to less than a fast food meal in electricity per run. Dual-purpose heritage breeds close the final loop. A Plymouth Rock cockerel reaches 5 to 6 pounds of processing weight in 20 to 22 weeks, on a feed conversion ratio of roughly 3.5 pounds of feed per pound of gain. Birds that do not enter the breeding rotation, extra cockerels and spent hens from older cohorts, I convert directly into protein for the table. Nothing in the system exits as waste. Everything cycles back as food, fertility, or genetic capital for the next generation of the flock. Subscribe to this channel and keep building alongside your flock, because every piece of this system connects to the next. The birds you raise correctly from this foundation will feed your family long after the supply chain that everyone else depends on has proven itself unreliable one time too many.